Triumphant Light is out, and I've logged over double-digit hours testing a huge range of different things, and a lot of them have felt awesome, powerful, and fun. Today, I've got my two favorite deck lists I've found so far for each of the 5 EX Pokemon that released in this latest card pack. Let's go ahead and jump into it, shall we? We're going to kick off with Garchomp EX decks today, my personal favorite among the EX Pokemon in this card pack. Garchomp, I think, has the potential to be the best fighting stage 2 Pokemon in pocket right now for one relatively straightforward reason. It's one of the only cards in the game that has a good curve when going first and second. For example, when you're going second, meaning you have first energy advantage, you put a fighting energy on Gible, attack for 20. The next turn, you put a second energy on Gabite, attack for 30. And then the third turn, you can put a third energy on Garchomp, but either crack for 100 into their active or start pressuring their bench in the back line for 50 damage a pop. Similarly, when you're going first, you can evolve into Gabite and attack for 30 with your first energy. Then you evolve into Garchomp and attack your second energy, poke something on their bench or their active for 50. And then for the rest of the game, you have the flexibility to either deal 100 or 50, depending on where it's most valuable to put the damage. I was really impressed with this card's ability to be a makeshift Hitmonlee when that was good, but also just bring the beat down when that was what you wanted to be doing. Our first deck list for Garchomp today is an all-in Chomp build featuring Garchomp and Aerodactyl EX as our first two Pokemon lines. The appeal of this deck list is you're going to have your namesake as consistently as possible since you're guaranteed to start on Gible, and as we just covered, you'll be pretty happy with that lead regardless of if you're going first or going second. Because this deck is designed to go an EX Pokemon into another EX Pokemon, your opponent typically has to get through an incredible amount of HP, often 300 plus to win the game, and you hit hard and fast while also being disrupted thanks to Aerodactyl EX's Primeval Law, which is stellar against a number of things such as Leafeon, Executor, Magnezone, and more. Our second Garchomp deck list is a fighting box variation, which means in addition to playing Garchomp as our finisher, we have a variety of one knockout point fighting and colorless Pokemon that offer varying utility. We have Hitmonlee and Farfetch'd as previous metagame staples, and then Pseudo-Wudo as well as Sky Shaman as new additions. The basic game plan with this deck is you want to lead single knockout point into single knockout point Pokemon to give you time to build up Garchomp in the back and deal a little bit of damage to start, so then Garchomp can come in and go ahead and clean your opponent out. One notable exclusion from this deck list is Marshadow, which is often found in the Fighting Box core. I found that because I was trying to build up Garchomp to 3 energy as quickly as possible in most of my games, it made it so I wasn't able to get 2 energy on Marshadow without setting my finisher too far behind, and the deck played a lot more smoothly without it. Arceus EX is obviously the face of the card pack, and it's felt incredibly powerful in the variety of different shells that I've played it in today. It has a whole host of supporting cards that it powers up in different ways, and today I've got 2 drastically different deck lists that leverage it in different ways. First up, we have an Arceus EX Crobat Heatran deck list that's notably only playing fire energy. While Crobat takes dark energy to attack, it's noteworthy that we have both a Zubat and a Golbat from Genetic Apex that can attack for colorless energy, giving them some utility as we move our way up the curve. That gets comboed with the fact that our Crobat has a free retreat cost, meaning after we get fully evolved, we can pull it back to the bench with the fire energy still on it, and then utilize Dawn to move that energy around the board up to Arceus or a Heatran to get cracking. One of the big appeals of this particular build is that you often go single knockout point Pokemon into single knockout point Pokemon into Arceus as a finisher, and all of our characters have really solid HP pools, with both of our single knockouts having 110 and then Arceus finishing on 140, and that's even before we get capes into the mix. Heatran in particular feels like it has really appealing breakpoints into the various grass decks in the metagame. For 2 energy, it does 60 while it's at full life, and then it does a whopping 100 once it has any damage marked on top of it. Arceus's breakpoints with Crobat's ability in particular feel absolutely nuts, with just 2 bench Pokemon you're cracking for 140, and if your bench is full, you're dealing 160, which clears out a variety of the metagame threats, even if they're wearing a giant cape in one go. Our second Arceus EX deck is leveraging Carnivine as well as Rotom as its cards that benefit from our Pokemon God. This deck list feels like it has a lot of parallels to the fighting box decks that I've really enjoyed in previous seasons. Your Carnivine is a 1 energy, deals a large amount of damage, in this case 50 for 1, and Rotom does its best Hitmonlee impersonation, dealing 20 to the back line and making it so Cyrus can drag things kicking and screaming to the front of the class. Sky Shaman really feels like it ties the room together here, since it lets you swap these Carnivine and Rotoms in and out from your active spot without losing any energy, giving you lots of time to power up Arceus EX as your potent finisher. We have 1 copy of Dawn in this deck list as well, so that way after we retreat a Rotom or a Carnivine for free, we can get attacking with it 1 turn sooner. Because this deck list has so many different utility basics, we're also leveraging 2 copies of Pokemon Communication, which in addition to the Pokeballs gives us lots of ready access to Arceus, so those Carnivines are hitting for 50 early and often consistently. Leafeon EX is probably the one I've spent the most time playing with so far, both because it's been fun and powerful, but also because I opened 2 stunning 2-star rainbow variations of this card. While there is a grass energy in the attack for Leafeon, it's worth noting that its Pokemon abilities self-generate that, so it's effectively a colorless card that both accelerates itself and other grass Pokemon such as Yanmega and Celebi. I'm not going to be featuring any Celebi deck lists in this video today, but there's lots of folks out there doing it. Some of those will be highlighted in the meta report tomorrow. Today, let's take a look at the non-coin flippy Leafeon decks that I think are sweet and good. First up, we have a Dialga Yanmega Leafeon variation that's playing all metal energy. Leafeon felt like it solved 2 problems in particular that this Dialga list had for me in previous seasons. The first is that we were short an extra attacker in a lot of our games. In my experience, you just needed something extra to hit with past Dialga and Yanmega, so you always had 2 potent EXs game in and game out. The other is that the games where you weren't starting on Dialga, you often felt a good bit behind, and obviously Dialga is still great to lead on here, but Leafeon is also powerful to lead on as well, hitting for 70 damage quickly and then subsequently still powering up your Yanmega behind it to be your secondary attacker. This deck list is one of the most consistent EX into EX Pokemon decks that I've played, since it has lots of ways to build up its secondary while the primary is dealing damage, and we get to play 2 copies of Cape as well as a copy of Erica, so we have a solid bit of sustain as well. If you want more than just a solid bit of sustain, this next deck list that's just Leafeon and Yanmega is the one for you. Most notably, it is leveraging our new, very powerful supporter, IRIDA, who says heal 40 damage from every one of your Pokemon that has a water energy attached to it. That's right, this is an all-grass Pokemon deck that's actually not playing any grass energy and instead just playing water, so we can spread that out across the board to our characters and have lots of sustain. Playing 2 copies of Capes, 2 copies of Irida, 2 copies of Erica, and some hefty EX Pokemon means that this deck list has a hard time getting knocked out by anything that's trying to hit you with just small chip shots worth of damage, which covers a good bit of things in our current metagame. Next up, we have Probopass EX, really hefty HP pool of 160 on a stage 1, but a little bit slower attack, taking 3 energy while only dealing 90 points of damage and providing itself with even more sustain. I think there are 2 primary ways to build around this card. Let's go ahead and get to it. The first and most obvious Probopass deck is the Dialga Probopass deck. You lead your energies on your Dialga, you charge up your Probopass behind it, and you switch into it as a finisher that has an incredible amount of sustain. The big upside to leveraging Probopass as opposed to things like Yanmega or others is 160 HP, means you get to survive bigger hits from things like Palkia, triple heads from a Celebi, or even the occasional Mewtwo side drive without the assistance of a Cape. That being said, we're still leveraging Cape in this deck because when you combined it with the damage reduction that this card has built into its kit, it makes it so you have a ton of sustain against smaller chip shot cards. Next up, we have a SKARMORY Druddigon Probopass deck. That is the second way you can approach playing this card, in my opinion. You play 0 energy in the case of Druddigon, or 1 energy in the case of SKARMORY lead attackers, and then slowly build up Probopass organically in your backline, eventually moving it as your finisher once your opponent takes their first 2 single knockout points. I love the fact that this build gets to play the maximum number of tool cards because both Rocky Helmet and Cape have really great utility on Probopass inside of different situations. Finally, Glaceon EX is the one in this expansion that I've had the most trouble trying to find a competitive deck for so far. It needs 3 energy to get attacking for 90, meaning you really need to hit a heads on a Misty or have a good Manaphy start to get it going. So let's go ahead and see how we can approach those in a couple of different ways. First up, we have a Glaceon Manaphy build featuring Baby Articuno as its secondary attacker. One of the things I think is really important to try and leverage when you're playing these Manaphy decks is you often want a single knockout point Pokemon like Baby Articuno as your attacker after Manaphy, because your Manaphy is almost always going to get knocked out, and if you move immediately into an EX Pokemon like Glaceon, it means your opponent only needs to deal a total of 190 points of damage most games to fully win. By stopping at Baby Articuno in the middle, you get to get some chip shot damage on the board and maximize the amount of damage your opponent has to output in order to clean up that victory. Past Glaceon, I think the real card to talk about in this deck is IRIDA, who we talked about earlier. This card can give you more sustain on both Articuno and Glaceon, kind of increasing that amount that your opponent needs to deal a good bit if you bob and weave in the correct route. Speaking of bobbing and weaving, I think another way to potentially try playing Glaceon is alongside STARMIE EX. This is a card from Genetic Apex that I've been a big fan of in the past that I think Irida's addition to the format might help save. Being able to retreat STARMIE EX back to your bench with damage marked on it and then putting up something else like a Glaceon or a Palkia to get attacking with and have it take damage as well before Irida heals everything that you've got could be a way to get that little bit of extra sustain and dodge the occasional lethal Cyrus that STARMIE had trouble with in our previous metagame. Thanks for making it through to the end of the video today. If you enjoyed my deck list roundup suggestions, be sure to smash that like button and make sure you're subscribed to the channel to don't miss other excellent Pokemon Pocket content here moving forward. Tomorrow we'll be doing our weekly metagame report. We'll be taking a look at the biggest tournaments that have happened since the card pack dropped, taking a look at analytically what are the best performing things. I would love to hear in the comments down below what you think we're going to find as the breakout deck tomorrow, and I hope your next pack is an excellent one.